Greetings, brothers and sisters. So right after I put up the video yesterday of Kyrie Irving and all these other things, Kyrie Irving was a part of it. This story broke like literally as I was uploading the video. Brooklyn Nets say Kyrie Irving won't play until he can do it full time, and they're pushing this story out there. And so, first of all, I have to always clarify this: I'm not talking about the vaccine. I'm not talking about medicine, not recommending medicine, not recommending what people do. Like I said, I've made my decision a long time ago. I made my decision a long, long time ago before COVID even existed, like in terms of, years and years ago. My decision was already made on this subject. So I'm all set, right? My wife, we're all set. We've made our decision. There's a great part of the heartfulness teaching. Master Chargy gave this great teaching that, in the West, we're in a perpetual state of choosing, right? Like you're always choosing something because we're consumers here. We come from a consumer mentality, and we're told all the time, oh, you have all these choices, right? And instead of making a choice and living with it, we make choices and then move on and then, second guess the choice and get rid of that choice and make another choice, right? I mean, that's our approach to marriage and all these things that we, have Americans and people in the West, but Americans particularly, are always having some sort of existential crisis and second guessing their choices or thinking that they're perpetually in a state of choosing. But you have to make choices. Like you have to say, all right, this is the way I'm going to do, this particular part of my life. This is going to be my diet. This is going to be my healthcare system. And of course, you might have to change that. There is reasons to change and say, all right, with more knowledge and more whatever, sometimes you have to change those choices, but sometimes you just have to pick a system. It could be a medical system. It could be a system of education, whether to homeschool your kids or to put them in school, right? And you might have to switch that up just for whatever reasons. There might be, one thing might be right in the beginning, but it would be wrong later on, and you can, evaluate. But people in America are too quick to always be in a state of choosing, like never making a choice and living with that choice, right? And so in terms of healthcare, like I only do something when I'm, I really have to do it. Like I feel like there's no other alternative. But in terms of my approach to healthcare, it's about always boosting the immune system. And when this thing came out, COVID, I said, yeah, when, whether it's COVID or something else down the road, people's immune systems are going to be taxed in the upcoming years. People's immune systems, which is everything, right? No matter what anybody says, the immune system is the difference between life and death or being sickly all the time or whatever it is, chronic illnesses as we have it now. And so a weakened immune system is, such a liability in this, the modern day world or any time, any part. But anyway, so I'm not making a comment on those things. My commentary here on Kyrie Irving is the way that the unvaccinated are being treated. And because these people that are treating unvaccinated this way, these liberal people, these neoliberal people, and many of them have been into herbs and organic food, right? I mean, Kyrie Irving, like I turned on the news this morning, and there was Brianna Keeler was on CNN with an African-American a woman who was a former ESPN commentator and I believe a player, like a female basketball player. And she was talking about Kyrie Irving just being different, how he saged, using the Native American sage sticks to cleanse the Boston Garden, right? When he took the court. And she said, he's just different. I'm like, for one, he is part Native American. I saw something on this where he was, he went to the tribe that he was a part of, right? So it's consistent with his, with his, whatever, his genetic makeup. But saging isn't something so out there. Like we do cleansing, we do a cleaning process in the heartfulness system where you use your mind to clean away past impressions and things like this. And so, that to me is a deeper level of cleaning. But saging is also, I consider it a good thing, and I've done that in the past, right? I don't do it now, but I understand why people do it. And it isn't like some out there thing, right? She was talking about his, being a flat earther for a while, and then him talking, in other videos about reading all kinds of conspiracy theories, so-called conspiracy theories. So Kyrie Irving has always been open to alternative narratives, but they're portraying him as being a cancer to the team and, all these things, right? I mean, he is somebody who is, not fitting in the mold, and he's not going to get vaccinated. I would be surprised if this thing is organic. I don't think he's going to cave based in what I've seen before. And so ESPN, which is completely a shill organization, it's so bad right now. It says ESPN Stephen A. Smith goes scorched earth on benched NBA star Kyrie Irving. Starts here with former NBA thug Kendrick Perkins, who, he is just a big dude who used to be really physical. He didn't have much like basketball talent. And now he's an ESPN commentator. And he starts in on Kyrie Irving saying this.
Hey, you're not bigger than the team. And
so the way that he's framing it is, they're all saying Kyrie's being selfish, but he's not bigger than the team. The team is all vaccinated. The city is mandating that you get vaccinated. And if you don't go along with it, you are being a selfish, unteam-like, not a good teammate, right? Anti-team person. Like, that's the first part of it.
I wouldn't be surprised if Kyrie Irving retires this season for at least 1 or 2 years and comes back. He's that stubborn, and I don't see him getting vaccinated.
He's that stubborn, and I don't see him getting vaccinated. And so, Kyrie Irving is losing $33 million, which is an interesting number. I've covered him before. He has these Illuminati eyes on his shoe, and somebody who is, open to conspiracy theories and alternative narratives. He could be this could be part of the show. You always have to, it's always part of the show one way or another. Whether he is, actually believes what he's doing here or this is some bigger part of the show, I don't know, right? But, but the stance that they're taking here, this is the corporate, the inline stance that somebody who has a different opinion, who goes against the mainstream, forcing of vaccinations on people, because that's what's happening here. You're being pressured to get vaccinated. And the people who are on the side of the vaccination, this is the mainstream media, the Democratic Party, a lot of Republicans, a lot of the various, all the news networks, Fox News, which is completely mandating this, Disney, which is mandating it, all the powers that are pushing this, they're saying like it's a wonder drug, that you'd be crazy not to take. But, for a wonder drug, it doesn't work the way that you would hope it would work, right? You can still get COVID, you can still be hospitalized, you can still die. And so it isn't like, well, it's such a wonder drug that everyone who's got vaccinated is, living the high life and they're all, there's no issues, right? It's something where it isn't like we can say 100% it prevents COVID and there are no real major side effects, because all drugs have side effects. I was listening to Daji, who is a pharmacist, Kamlesh Patel, the current master of the heartfulness system, and he said that he's somebody who had 7 pharmacies in New York City, and he said there's a saying in the drug community that with drugs there's always going to be a side effect. And this is allopathic medicine, right? This is the mainstream medicine. There's always side effects. This is something that everybody knows. And so it isn't like, you have to weigh the possibilities and risk of side effects over the possible gain of taking the drug. That's what you have to do in anything, right? You always have to evaluate the risk versus reward. And Kyrie Irving's doing that, and he thinks that the risk is too severe, whatever it is, right? If this is organic, then he has a right to say these things. He's given up $33 million this year, and who knows how much money next year. He's got, he's making $30 million a year, $30+ million a year for the remainder of his contract, right? And he's going to be seen as a troublemaker, and he's going to be devalued. No one's going to give him a max contract, somebody of his playing ability. Like, he is definitely hurting his brand. And so he is risking quite a lot personally in terms of, his belief in this. So to call him stubborn, right, because he isn't caving like everyone else has to, or at least they think they have to, is, it's just when you're on the side of, you're supposedly on the side of Black Lives Matter, you're supposedly on the side of, this whole movement to do with gender and all these things, that people's beliefs, what they believe inside, right? Like if somebody is, believes that they're a woman and they're sexually a man, and inside themselves they believe that they're a woman, you're supposed to honor that, right? But so Kyrie Irving is somebody who believes that the vaccines are going to do him long-term harm. He doesn't trust the medical community. Inside of him, those are his beliefs, but he's stubborn, right? We live in a time where they're saying over and over again, you have to honor other people's beliefs, what they believe inside of themselves. But for Kyrie Irving, because it's to do with the vaccination, he's just being stubborn. His beliefs don't matter. So all these commentators, all these people are showing themselves as complete fraud. They're going against everything that they've been saying, like the last couple of years, this whole movement that's going on, this whole progressive woke movement. And then when Kyrie Irving comes out and a couple of these other guys come out and say they don't want the vax, they immediately throw that out, right? They throw out what happened in Tuskegee. They throw out all these things. And the way that he's being treated is, people are being segregated. He's being segregated right now. He can't, practice with the team. He's being isolated. And he may or may not even have had COVID. I don't know if he had COVID or not. I think he did have COVID at one point. And so he might have antibodies, so this isn't even something that should be talked about. So let's move forward to Stephen A. Smith, who's just always been a complete clown.
The Brooklyn Nets need to get rid of Kyrie Irving.
They need to get rid of him. They need to get rid of him. Think about the way he's framing that. Like he's a piece of property, like he's their slave. Get rid of him. He's an employee. He's got a contract. There's a players' union. He's a unionized employee. They recruited him. They wanted to sign him. The Brooklyn Nets wanted to sign him and Kevin Durant to make them championship contenders. They signed a contract. They have a legal agreement. The league has said he can, choose to put the vaccine in his body or not. And because he's not bowing to the pressure, he should be thrown away, right? Get rid of him. That's what he's saying here. He has rights under the union. The other thing is they've been pushing for mental health issues, right? There's this guy, Kevin Love, DeMar DeRozan, and a couple of other players who came out and said that they've been depressed. Of course, we saw the stuff with Naomi Osaka or whatever her name is, a tennis player. And we saw the stuff with Simone Biles. And everybody's supposed to celebrate people coming out and saying they have mental issues. Kyrie Irving took a couple of days off last year and, was for personal reasons. And, but these other athletes are being treated different, right? Because Kyrie Irving has some truther in him. At least that's the, character he's playing here, whatever it is, right? And to say they just need to get rid of him, what does that mean? Like euthanize him? Like what are they going to do? Break his contract? Violate his rights here as a human being? The NBA has said that, and there's no forced governmental vaccine mandates. He has the right to choose out of that. Oh, you should just get rid of him. Like he's being selfish. Think about what this guy just said, right? Listen to this effer.
He got to go.
Yes.
He's just a problem.
He's just a problem.
Just a problem.
He's just a problem.
I want to put everything in its proper perspective, Keisha.
You're a shill that if you said anything differently, you'd be fired and you wouldn't get your $8 million. This guy, the other day, yesterday, I don't think I could cover it here, but he played for John Gruden for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when they won the Super Bowl, and he called John Gruden a fraud. Like, this is how it's going, right? Like, anybody who's seen to be on the other side of things, a right-wing person, a Trump person, a truther, anybody who's going against the establishment, and these, these sheeple shills here, right?
Myself included. Maybe not you, Key, but a lot of us that had reservations about taking the vaccine.
Understood.
But we took it.
Yes.
They had reservations about taking the vaccine, but they took it, right? Well, yeah, good for you. That's what you did, right? That was your choice, and I don't have any problem with anybody taking it, right? I've made this perfectly clear. You're perfectly welcome to take it. Like, I don't say anything to anybody. I don't care if people take it or not. I don't, have any kind of, in all of my presentation here, I don't use force. The heartfulness system doesn't use force. And I believe that people are completely welcome to believe whatever they believe, no matter how crazy it might be. as long as it doesn't affect other people. And, most of the unvaccinated aren't upset about people getting vaccines, right? This is families, people have it, and there's some, people who have it, where people are very firmly against getting vaccinated and their family members get vaccinated and they have a falling out. I mean, those things are happening, right? But as far as other people taking it, God bless you. Do whatever you want, right? It's, there's a choice. Everyone's got to make their own choice on this. It's clearly a choice that's individual in nature. Like everyone's making their individual choice. There's couples who are, one of them's vaccinated and one of them isn't. We have this, people aren't doing this in pairs. They're not doing it as groups. Each person has to make this personal choice. And they're going to probably upset some people in their lives by making the choice, right? But the powers that be, the system, is pushing you to do this. That's the difference. You're not going along with the system or the beast. And so, do you trust the beast? Do you trust the system, right? A very heavy-handed controlling system. Do you trust the medical community? So he's saying he had reservations about it. But he got over it because he wanted to make his $8 million at ESPN. It was mandated by Disney. He had to do it to get paid and do his job. And, he's making a lot of money for basically being not that great of a commenter. Like Stephen A. Smith, it's not like I've ever heard him say something like, wow, that was brilliant. Wow, you have such great insight, right? I mean, he's somebody who is, argumentative, a lot of emotion, and he is a popular figure in the world of sports in terms of, his show is the number one show, this show that they're on. He just got rid of his co-host because a guy, he felt threatened by him, Max Kellerman, who's another guy, even more unlikable, who is, kind of a know-it-all. But they had the number one show here. He has the number one show for a number of years. And so he isn't going to get $8 million anywhere else if he doesn't take the vaccine. So that was his choice, right? Either give up your position and, take a stand on this thing, or take it and be a shill for it. That was, you either take it and you tell everyone else to take it, or you're not going to have your show anymore. You're not going to be Stephen A. Smith. You're going to be somebody who used to be famous, right? And he's not a truther, so he went along with it because it was better for him in his mind financially to go along with it. He said he had reservations, but what he weighed was being a normal person that didn't have a high-paying job and going against something that the powers that be were forcing on everybody, especially Disney and ESPN. And so if he wanted to continue with his high-profile job, he had to take it, and he had to push other people to take it. That was his choice, right? That's the choice that he was given. But he chose. See, they didn't force him in the sense that, he always had a choice. They just tipped the scales, right? ESPN and all these places tipped the scales. And so now he's on the hook because he's taken it. And for him, it's like, well, if I had to take it and this is what I need to do to keep making my money, I'm going to go all in on Kyrie Irving, as all these other commenters are as well. They're all shills. They don't stand for anything, right? All this stuff they talked about, Black Lives Matter, all this stuff that they've been talking about, they don't really believe in, because when it came to their money, it came to his money, he's choosing his money over Kyrie Irving, who is a fellow African American who's making a choice and standing up to the beast. He's standing up to the man, Kyrie Irving is. But this guy, they said scorched earth, right? This is scorched earth. You're a complete sellout, right? This is what the face of a sellout looks like. Somebody who, is choosing money and position in the system, in the beastly system, over other people's ability to choose for themselves. Just say, all right, you know what? I don't agree with his choice, but I support his right to choose. No, get rid of him. He's a problem, right? I chose it. You chose it.
Not just because of us, but because of the people that we were going to be around.
See, that's not how they're telling us the science works on this thing. They've said it over and over again. You're less likely to get COVID and pass it on to other people if you get vaccinated. I mean, that's the official story. But you can still get it. You can still pass it on to other people. But aside from that, all of these basketball players and all these people who are, covering these basketball teams last year didn't have the vax, or some of them didn't have the vax. Kyrie Irving didn't have the vax, and it wasn't a problem. They still left all these arenas open, and COVID has, either maintained or gone down in the country, right? There's less COVID now. And so, again, you have the majority of people are vaccinated. About 100 million, about 1/3 of the country have had COVID. And so they have natural antibodies. So this thing is never going to be as bad as it once was, right? It's sort of run its course. And so him saying that makes it sound like there was an increased threat recently, and there isn't. But the other thing is that they would test him regularly, Kyrie Irving. If he tests positive, he would immediately be put in some sort of quarantine situation. Like when I had COVID, I made sure I didn't go outside. Once I knew I had COVID, we didn't want to pass it on to somebody else, right? My wife and I. And so we self-quarantined. This is back in April of 2020 when it was just coming out, right? Maybe the end of March, beginning of April, I don't know, somewhere around that time. I had difficulty breathing, difficulty sleeping, waking up, gasping for air. It was, it's scary. Like that's, not being able to breathe is scary, right? You ever been held under the water? Your friends dunk you or something? Some big kids dunk you at the pool, or you're, when I was swimming in the ocean and a wave, I would get caught up in a wave that was breaking. The wave would toss me around, and you have trouble getting back up to the surface, and you're gasping for air, right, or just holding your breath. It's nice when you get it. It's nice to be able to breathe, right? In fact, I was so grateful for being able to breathe. Like when I got better, like it was something I took for granted. Like I was like, oh my God, I'm just breathing. Like, when my wife and I were talking about all the time, wow, we can breathe finally, right? So it sucked having it. I didn't want to pass it on to somebody else. But then once I, got over it, I mean, I had some lingering issues, like I said, some post-COVID health issues. But then, I had antibodies. I wasn't passing it on, and I wasn't getting it again, from somebody else. And so, 100,000 people who've had it, that's not an issue, right? And if you did get it, all you have to do is isolate. Like once you get it, you're not, he's talking about how, many people who get the vaccine end up, you can still be a carrier. He's saying, oh, well, I wanted to protect the people around me. You're not that guy. You're a selfish MNFer. You're taking the $8 million and you're burning Kyrie Irving as a corporate ESPN Disney shill. You're not that guy. Oh, I was so concerned about other people. I just cared about other people so much. Yeah. Like you care about Kyrie, right? No. Like just be honest about what you are, right? Come on, bro.
And now, more importantly, the obligations that we have. I don't get vaccinated. I can't do first take. I don't get.
There it is, right? And I didn't even know he was admitting this. I was just caught, like, I knew this. Like, I just knew it. Now he's admitting it. He doesn't get vaccinated. He can't do first take. And his doing his job is more important than his reservations about vaccines and the historical aspect of Tuskegee and all the other things that African-American people who are aware of these things is thinking about, right? This is, think about this. He just said it. He just admitted what I said. He had a choice between doing first take, his obligations, doing first take, and, his reservations to getting the vaccine.
If I don't do first take, I'm leaving everybody stranded. Not to mention compromise.
He's leaving everybody stranded. He's saying he's doing it for his coworkers, but it's the $8 million a year. He's the highest paid, whatever this job is, pundit, sports pundit out there.
My own bankroll and bottom line, which I was not going to do. Let me be very, very clear about that.
See, he's admitting to it. They're all laughing. He wasn't giving up his money. He wasn't putting himself in a compromised position. So he sold out. He got over his reservations, right? Whatever they were in terms of the community. And it's not just that he has to get the vaccine. He has to promote it. He has to tell everyone how great it is, right? And again, I'm not talking about the vaccine, whether it's good or not, or any of these things. I'm not talking about choosing it or not choosing it. I make that perfectly clear because of YouTube's community guidelines. I'm talking about what his choice was. His choice was not be Stephen A. Smith, which I said already, and he just admitted, not be on first take, or be a shill for it. Like those were the things that he was pressured to do by ESPN and Disney. He had no choice. And Keyshawn Johnson is laughing because he had the same thing to do with John Gruden. He had to throw John Gruden on the bus, a former colleague of these guys, a coach for this guy that was the guy that brought him to the Super Bowl, Keyshawn Johnson was on the Jets that sucked for years, and he won a Super Bowl ring because he was lucky enough to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when Gruden was coaching, and they won a Super Bowl. But he threw him under the bus because that was the party line. And I'll get back to John Gruden in a moment. And so this is, where the man is having a conversation. The beast is having a conversation with you, and you don't even need the conversation because you know what you're supposed to do. You know what you're supposed to do as a news person, as a politician, as a corporate, executive. You know what you're supposed to do, right? And anybody that doesn't do this is going to get steamrolled. That's what this is about, right? Everyone is, supposed to join the same party line, whether it's, condemning John Gruden or going after Kyrie Irving. We know what you're supposed to do, right? But who cares about Joe Biden droning 7 kids? Joe Biden killed 7 kids, these Afghan kids that we've wrecked their country. We as Americans have wrecked Afghanistan. Like, we made it worse for Afghanistan people, especially the good people there, right? And now they have an emboldened Taliban and all these things. And Joe Biden, who voted for those wars, and all these hippies, these boomer hippies, these so-called, what I call these so-called liberals, right, the neoliberals, the ones who aren't really liberals anymore, who voted for Joe Biden, who's been a corporate shill, and he voted for all these wars. I mean, think about the Vietnam War. My brother fought in the Vietnam War. My older sister, his younger sister was a hippie protesting against the Vietnam War. I mean, this is what was happening. And these baby boomers came out, anti-war baby boomers, are voting for Joe Biden because he's not Donald Trump. The hypocrisy is off the charts.
The hypocrisy is off the charts, and it is sickening.
Okay, I ain't apologizing for that to a damn soul, all right?
He's not apologizing that to a damn soul because he's got his money, and they're all laughing. Because money is more important than standing up for anything. Money is the key denominator here. He's saying it, they're laughing, right? For Kyrie Irving, who's willing to give up $33 million and be principled, they're not, on board with that. At least applaud the guy for giving up $33 million. Do you know anybody else who gave up $33 million because of a personal stand? And he's getting hammered by everybody, right? I mean, if this is legitimate and Kyrie Irving's not playing a role or a character, and he's just organically standing up for what he believes in here, he's given up $33 million and, his dream, because he may never play in the NBA again. I mean, this could be it for him, right? And if he's willing to do that, he's made money, right? He's rich, but I mean, $33 million. How many people would turn down $33 million? You go to most of the people who are not vaccinated, who are against vaccines, and you offer them $33 million, what percentage of it would you think would take the vaccine, right? I mean, how many people who are anti-vax would take the vaccine for $33 million? So he should at least be, applauded for that. I've never heard of anybody turning down $33 million because of a principle. The only other guy is Pat Tillman, who, because of his belief in the American system, wrongly, I don't agree with what Pat Tillman chose. Like, I don't think it was a good choice. I mean, he ended up dead, the outcome of it. I didn't think it was a good choice at the time, but he gave up a professional football career to go fight for the American government. He was applauded, right, for the American people after the big event. And Pat Tillman was applauded for being so unselfish. But Kyrie Irving's not only standing up for himself, but he's standing up for his, not just other people like him, and people who are, African-American people who are hesitant about this because of Tuskegee, who are being, there was a video I saw that the New York Post put on that there was a, black family, African-American family, got thrown out of a restaurant because they didn't have their vax card. And that's, segregation. I mean, that's going back to the old Jim Crow laws, right? And all these guys, all they care about, he cares about his money, right? These guys care about their money. That's what they're saying. And so Kyrie Irving is so much higher than them. I mean, even in terms of just being a character in the show, if this thing is completely staged, that just being a character in the show, his integrity and his, commitment, giving up that much money is so much better than these guys, right? Taking a stand for something you believe in. Stephen A. was like, oh, no, you know what? I'm not going to get paid. I can't do the show. I'm caving. What do you want me to say? I'm your man. I'm your shill. You want me to attack Kyrie Irving? You want me to attack John Gruden? I'll do whatever you guys tell me. I just want this position. Don't take away my money and my position. Okay, well, there goes your integrity and your any sense of being a an organic, legitimate human being, right? You're just a corporate shill, just like, so many other people. And so this is such a watershed event. I got another long little narrative that I made after I made this, original screen grab stuff that I'm showing you here. And I'm in the editing process now. But I also need to point this out. So there's, this is such a big event in terms of everything that's going on. And so what Stephen A. Smith said was Kyrie Irving is a selfish player. He said that yesterday. He's called him a disgrace. He says they need to get rid of him, and he's a problem. All because of, like all high-profile people, they were faced with the same choice. And he said that he, like Kyrie Irving, he had his, reservations about getting the vaccine. But when it came to his decision, unlike Kyrie Irving, what was important for him, he said, I got to be responsible to all the people I work with. But then he said, well, more important than that, more important than being responsible to my coworkers, he said this.
I don't get vaccinated. I can't do first take. I don't get, not to mention compromising my own bankroll and bottom line, which I was not going to do. Let me be very, very clear about that. That's how I roll, okay?
So what's most important to him in this situation is money and his show and the power that goes with it, right? Being who he is, the position he has as the number one sports pundit, the money he gets, and all these corporate media giants, all of them are, owned by the same basic people with the same basic, ideology. So if he gets outed at ESPN, he doesn't take the vax, and he backs Kyrie Irving, he's done. His position's done. His ability to make this kind of money is done. His lifestyle is done. I mean, being a celebrity, hobnobbing with celebrities and celebrity athletes, going to all these big, have your company fly you to the NBA Finals and the Super Bowl and these, various events, getting insider information on sports. I mean, people who love sports, this is a big deal. It's a big deal to him. So in terms of your money and your position, what would it take for you to give those things up? Like just, what would it take? Like if it isn't this, what level would it take? What if he found out information about the vaccine that was negative and he realized it was going to hurt people? I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying let's just, as if, right? What if this happened? Let's say that he found out that there was, some sort of side effects with the vaccine and he realized it or he took it or he, got access to information. Would he then stand up for it, right? With his power and his position, especially in the African American community, because these are all prominent people in the African American community. Shaq and Charles Barkley are very pro-vaccine, and so are most of these other prominent sports figures, right? And so they're having trouble in the African American community with vaccine hesitancy. And so would he, give up his power and position for that if he knew the vaccine might not be, good for them or even worse? What if it was something that had long-term effects, right? What if it was something there to help depopulate the planet? I'm not saying any of those things are true. These are just some theories that are out there. And what if he knew? Like, would he then? I mean, I don't think he would. I think it's more important to him. Like, I don't think he has any integrity. I mean, again, think about this. I knew about this 3 days ago, and now he's admitting to it. I said this in a video either yesterday, and I was talking about how Disney is an ESPN. It was yesterday's video, and I said that ESPN and Disney made it mandatory for vaccines. And it's clear what their position is and the position of the establishment. And he had no choice but to go after Kyrie Irving. He had no choice to take this position. Like, he can't think for himself. He can't have his own opinion. This is what the beast wants him to do. This is what I said yesterday, and he's admitting it, that money is the overwhelming factor here in doing his show, both of which he had to get the vaccine and take this position against Kyrie Irving, or he would be fired and he would no longer have this position. And so that's what's most important to him. And, again, I'm not bragging or whatever it is, but I do this all the time because I read people. I knew exactly what his motivation was. Like, I've seen the guy. I know what kind of person he is, because of the heartfulness meditation that I do and the reading of other people, the training I have as a counselor, master's degree in counseling, reading other people, being just a thoughtful, observant person, being a person with dyslexia that has pattern recognition. Like, I have lots of things I really suck at. Like, I'm not, impressed with myself. But if you watch my videos, I have insight into what makes people tick. I have insight into people's internal worlds. And again, not a brag, but obviously I'm good at this, right? And I said this yesterday and today before I even knew he admitted it here. And this is a big admit here. He's saying his primary motivation is money and his position. And so no matter what he's saying as a person that's a pundit, that's giving information out there, and you can say that about all these news pundits and newscasters on CNN and pretty much anybody who has a cushy job in the establishment, that their primary reason is because of money and fame or whatever it is. So they're masters, right? The people that control those things. If you're a slave to money, if you're a slave to fame, this goes back to the heartfulness system prayer, right? We say a prayer before we meditate. And the middle line is, we are yet but slaves of wishes, putting bar to our advancement. And what that means is that people, in general, all of us, our egos and the desires that our egos have, our wants and our desires, block our spiritual progress. Because we will do things that goes against our spiritual progress and goes against, our soul and what God wants us to do, goes against our hearts for money and fame and all these things, right? We're a slave to these things. When you're in a human body, it's very easy to be a slave to something, right? An addiction, and people who are addicted to something are a slave to it. But many people are a slave to their money, right? He's a slave to his money. He's saying his money was the biggest reason, and also doing the show, right? Fame and money and his position. And so can you trust a person like that to give you an honest answer? I mean, because the people that control his money and his position, and it's the same cabal of really wealthy men in these corporations and things, right? These banksters, these guys that control ESPN and control what he says because they control his money, they control all these things. They certainly want him to go after Kyrie Irving because they want more African American people and people in general to get their vax. They want everyone to, see this and say, look, you can't get away with this. You can't, you're going to have to get vaxxed just like Kyrie Irving is, right? Otherwise, you'll be banished from society. You'll lose your money. You'll lose your position, right? This is what they want. They want to pressure you into this. And again, I'm not saying anything about the vax. I'm just saying what they're all admitting. Stephen A. Smith said they got him, right? They got him. His slave masters said to him, either get the vax or you're out at ESPN. I can't continue doing my job, and I'm not going to get paid. And so because he's, a slave to this money and this lifestyle, and these guys who control that can tell him to do whatever, and he's probably going to do it, right? I don't know at what level he would draw a line in the sand and say, wait, that's too far. I'm going to quit. But, I don't think there's anything, right? I mean, this guy, and a lot of these guys who are out there, someone like Anderson Cooper on CNN and all these people that have positions and power. Joe Biden's another one. There's lots of people out there. They have no line in the sand that they won't cross if they're told by the people that control their positions and can wreck them, with just a phone call. Then they're not going to, they'll go along with whatever the party line is, whatever the beast is. You can see it, right? And so, what can you say about people like, I'm going to even take this farther in a little bit because I already did this other voiceover. I'm not going to say it here twice. And so let's get back to the regular scheduled programming, and then I'll, come back around to this piece again in a moment.
And we've aligned, and we're mission-minded. I'm not going to be the one to jump off the train to compromise the mission.
And so he's saying that all the other teammates went along with this. And so he needs to cave because of peer pressure and because he's a member of a team. He said, originally I cut that part off, but he said, if I'm a member of a team, I'm going to go along with what everyone else in the team is doing. And that's effed up, right? Given what we're talking about here and what's happening, it's effed up. And so then he says this.
conspiracy Kyrie Irving wants to come up with, all right, good luck with that. But the bottom line is that means you're looking at everybody else who's taking the vaccine.
This is a very divisive issue. I mean, it's something where, I think what you're seeing now, I don't think, I know this. You know it as well. Anybody who's seen this knows it. That people who are, have taken the vax and are really adamant about it. Like some of them just don't care. They've just done it. They've gone along with it. It is whatever it is. But the people who are really into it and they hate the unvaccinated and they hope the unvaccinated get sick and, and possibly die of COVID. I mean, that's where it's gotten. And people who are really into being unvaccinated are looking at the vaccinated with such hate and they feel the same thing. It's a very divisive issue. It's dividing America. And the powers that be, you're talking about Fox News, which would be the one sort of big major news network that would be sort of, friendly to the anti-vax people, but they've made it mandatory at their network. And so this is 100%, in terms of the people who have power are pushing one side of this equation, right? And so it's very divisive, and it's something that's, dividing families, couples and things like this. And so, and he's going in on one side, not because, like he said, he was hesitant to get the vaccine. I mean, this guy said he was hesitant for whatever reason, but he went along with it because of what was, because of his position, right? Because of his career. And so he can't be, your opinion doesn't matter then. Because what you chose, it wasn't the vax or non-vax. What Stephen A. Smith chose was whether being able to do his show or not, right? If he doesn't get it, he's got to quit his show. And Kyrie Irving's willing to do that, but pretty much none of these other guys were, none of Kyrie Irving's teammates were, right? And they're all kind of, against him because they're like, well, we all did it. Why won't you go along with it, right? And so that's, that's where we are right now. So after I finished this video, it occurred to me I missed out on fully expanding on what Stephen A. Smith just said and the importance of it, because there were lots of white people who were against slavery. And if they weren't against slavery, they were against the abusive treatment of slaves, right? I mean, you're always going to find some people who aren't on board with this type of behavior, right? Maybe the majority of people, in terms of at least the abusive nature of slavery. Or they would not have slaves themselves, but they were, they didn't do anything to the institution of slavery. You also have people who, like say in Germany, who weren't on board with Hitler and the Nazis. I mean, think about what we have now, right? A divided country. There are people who didn't, vote for Hitler, didn't want Hitler to be their leader, and in some cases they were shocked to find out afterwards what was going on, right? Because for them it wasn't, they didn't know about the concentration camps or whatever it was, right? And there are lots of people that, they didn't like the oppressive nature of Nazism, where they had to have papers and, checkpoints. I mean, the martial law aspect. Lots of Germans weren't into that, just like any country, right? I mean, there's lots of people in Israel who are against the treatment of Palestinians, right? And so you have that with the unvax, because you see, the unvax are being treated in a way that is similar to all those other groups, where the overwhelming force, the corporate force, the political force, the media, all the various, power players and power brokers are pushing for you to get vaccinated, right? And Stephen A. Smith is aware of this because all the NBA players, even though they have the right not to get vaccinated, really they don't have it. They can't play, in many cases here it's multiple games, home games, can't travel really to Canada effectively, and it's going to, can't practice with a team. I mean, the rules are bent against them. And so the organization, the fans, their family who's dependent on their, making the money from, their NBA career, everybody's pushing them towards making this decision, right? And so they know there's the pressure because Stephen A. Smith is saying he caved to the pressure himself. He's going along with the corporate power, the political power, the medical power, even though he comes from a group that, because of the things that happened at Tuskegee, the African-American people are against this, right? They're at least suspicious of the medical community, and the government for lots of reasons. And there is vaccine hesitancy among African Americans for those reasons, right? And so most of us aren't of a scientific mind. We can't collect raw data. We don't understand. I can listen to these medical people, and if I really concentrate and I maybe do some research, I can kind of figure out what they're talking about. But when they're really talking about this type of research, and I have some background because of classes I took about psychological statistics and things in counseling world, so I have a sense of it, and I have a good mind for things like this. But I really, I'm not a person who could collect raw scientific data in terms of the medical community and then interpret it, right? Because it's not written in English, right? The things that we get are the, interpretation of scientific materials and data, right? The things that we get are not, have been dumbed down for all of us to understand. And so, none of us really can comment on unless we have some sort of scientific background, really we don't have the ability to read and collect data. And there's so many things that are like that. And there's so much disinformation out there. It's really hard to say in terms of, concrete evidence that we know for a fact on a scientific level whether the vaccine is good for us or not, in terms of even being able to trust the scientific community. And there's lots of doctors and scientific people who have been scrubbed from social media that are reporting things that are, against saying the vaccine isn't good, right? And so it isn't for us about science. Stephen A. Smith isn't doing this based in science. I'm not making my decision based in mainstream science. I'm making my decision based on whether or not I trust the scientific community, whether I trust Dr. Fauci or Biden or any of these people, right? It's a matter of whether I trust the American government and knowing, for example, that they all believe we're overpopulated, and I believe we're overpopulated. That's a factor when I look at these types of things, right? And so, in terms of making his decision, Stephen A. Smith he didn't want to go against the beast. He likes his position in the beast. He's successful. He likes his money. He likes being on, First Take. And he could either throw that away and, embrace these types of what is called conspiracy theories, be a Kyrie Irving, or he could go along with the beast. Just like all these other people went along with the beast when there was slaves, for example. Now, we don't know how it's going to play out right now. A lot of us think we know. Like a lot of, people on both sides think they know. But it's going to play out one way or another. And either the vaccine is good for people or it is harmful for the people or whatever it is, right? And we'll see over, the next coming decades or so, right? Because it seems like more of a long-term thing than anything else, right? The long-term issues, just like smoking. Like when you smoke cigarettes, it's 20 years before you get the effects. I've talked about that before. There's lots of things out there that take a number of years before they set in on you. So you get exposed to them, and the effects are not right away. It could be something poisonous, that takes a long time to affect your body in one way or another, right? Carcinogens and things like this. So, we don't know how it's going to play out, right? But we all have to bet on one side or the other. We all have to make our choice. And for so many people, the chips are so far stacked against them, right? They're so, highly piled up on one side that they have no choice. They think they have no choice, right? Stephen A. Smith wasn't going to give up his job. What would he do to keep his job? Would he inject a poison in his body? If someone said, look, we're going to inject a poison in your body that kills you in 20 years, but you'll have 20 good years as, Stephen A. Smith and you'll make all this money, right? Let's say they actually told him it was a poison. Would he do it, right? What would he do to keep his job? You look at the way he's acting here. His money and his job were so important to him that he would be willing, there's lots of things he'd be willing to ignore or go along with. And this is what happened in all these places. All these people that talk about how they're anti-slavery or anti-Nazis or any of these things, many of them went along with it in a past life and would go along with it now, right? Would never speak up, would never say anything, just even denouncing it, never mind doing anything, right? And so that's why humanity is the way it is. And I'm not somebody like I know the system's collapsing one way or another. So I'm not concerned about that. I'm not standing up for anything. I'm not, I don't offer any resistance here. I'm not saying we should protest or fight the beast, because the system needs to collapse. I mean, that's the belief in the teachings from the heartfulness system, that this system is blocking people's spiritual progress, and we're heading to a disastrous physical effects and spiritual effects through this system. We're going in the wrong direction. It's demonic. We're going in the wrong way. That's my personal belief, and there's no fixing the system. That's another, that's another belief that I share that comes from the heartfulness system, but also my own interpretation of reality. So I read this from Whispers of the Brighter World, this quote: "These prophecies do not concern you. You are undergoing the damaging effects of this insidious pollution, which will lead the world to collapsing. But you can neither stop time nor modify the system in place. Then protect yourself as well as possible from these harmful effects, and pray for your brothers of the future." And so this was my attitude anyway. It's been my attitude for a while. This message concerned me, but the way I look at it now, it's just an S show, right? Everything's going to go south, and what we think is offensive today is going to be nothing to what happens tomorrow. Like, it's just going to get worse until the system collapses. And this is, what happens when a civilization collapses. And then there's going to be something else rebuilt afterwards. And that may take, hundreds of years, and I'm not going to be around for any of that, right? But in terms of saving the system or saving other people or, whatever it might be, none of these things mean that much to me, one way or another. Because it's, a time where there's going to be a massive die-off. There's going to be population reduction. And it's not going to be just from the so-called controllers, because there's divine will and divine forces at play here. And so for me, I'm not saying, any of these things. Like, I just don't, I'm not saying take a stand or don't take a stand, because none of it really matters, right? Like, you're not going to change the system. You're not going to really affect anything in terms of this, this material system, but you can evolve spiritually. And that's my emphasis, or the emphasis of the heartfulness system. But I did go through something like this years ago, where I was working at a treatment center, and these were, undesirable kids, teenage sex offenders, right? And they were not likable kids. And there was this Russian guy who was somehow a social worker, but he was more like a villain from a Rocky, Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, right? Not like a Dolph Lundgren, but bigger than me, like 6'5", and bearded and just sort of, aggressive. And he came to one of our counseling meetings. And so this is all counselors, mostly liberal, new age type of people. And my boss was, taking some sort of opiates to deal with her massive migraine. She was the head of our counseling department. And so, I've told some of these stories before. And he says to us that, it was always on a waiting list. So kids would come into the treatment center, and there'd be a waiting list. As soon as they would leave, somebody else was ready to fill their bed. And so it was always this idea to move kids through it, because they didn't want, people waiting too long on the waiting list, right? Potential customers. Even though it was supposed to be a nonprofit, they banked about $9 million a year. It was like $120,000 per kid, right? Expensive, to keep these kids in the treatment center. And school districts and towns and social worker, social service agencies were paying for this. Governments, right? We're paying for these kids to go through this treatment center to get, to lose their offending behaviors. And so there was a time where there wasn't a waiting list. And so the guy shows up at a staff meeting, and we were counselors and we were, clinicians, and there was some caseworkers, right? We each were assigned to a cottage, and we had 12 kids on if we were clinicians, we had 12 kids on our caseload. And there was also a caseworker that worked with 2 clinicians in the cottage, because the cottage was 24 kids, and the caseworker had 24 kids on their caseload. But we were always down staffed. There was always, it was a high turnover job. So there was always a clinician missing or a caseworker missing, right? So we had to do all these jobs. But this guy says to us, look, the beds We don't have a waiting list. So don't send a kid out, even if they've graduated, even if they're, they're past and they're ready to go. Don't let them leave until we have somebody else to fill their bed, which was like effed up, like just, immoral, illegal. I mean, all these things, you know. And I was like, I knew there was seedy stuff going on there. I mean, I didn't have a high opinion of the place. I'd been there a while. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that, right? I'm not violating their constitutional rights. But in terms of my personal situation, I had the insanity of my ex and all the things that were going on in our family and 6 kids. And I was making like $32,000 a year. And we were living in poverty. And, I had to work my way up the counseling field to get licensed in these things to make enough money to really support my family well, right? So we were already poor and, impoverished, and risking losing that job, for these kids that were all criminals in one way or another, right? And so that's the choice that you have to make, right? Like, do you put your family at risk, right, financially, or do you go along with something that you know to be wrong? And people all have to make those decisions, right? I just didn't talk to anybody. I would talk directly to the agency and say the kid had graduated without making it, I didn't go to my boss or my, the CEO and say, I'm not doing that. I just was, all right, well, I'm not here. He sent out this email, right? And I'm like, I'm not getting on board with that. It's illegal, whatever it is. Job sucks and whatever, right? And it's just wrong. But I wasn't like, protesting or making a big stink about it. I just said, all right, if a kid's ready to leave, I'm just going to tell their parole officer, So, I mean, I found a way to deal with it, but people have to make these decisions, and the beast is always going to tell you to do something wrong. Power is always going to try to, eventually power is going to be involved in some kind of bad decisions that hurts other people, and they're going to want you to be a part of it, right? They're going to want you to go along with it. And whistleblowers suffer dramatically. Kyrie Irving, somebody like this that stands up to the beast publicly, they get hammered every possible way, right? And so that, that's the way it is. But for all these people that sell their souls to the devil, because that's what Stephen A. Smith is doing here, for his $8 million job, Disney's the devil, right? Like in many ways, Disney is the devil. And so, Baphomet being a hero and their movies and, all the devil worshiping stuff they put out there. And so he's selling out his, himself, his integrity, his, the demographic he is a part of, because some people are going to listen to him, right? And, they're selling all those things out for $8 million a year and whatever, his position there at ESPN. And these are the choices you have to make. And these are the choices now in America, because the pie is, there's no pie left anymore. It's not just being split in a different way. The pie is gone. There's no money. We're in debt, right? We're all, dramatically in debt. We all owe $88,000 just for the national debt. Then we owe our personal debt. I mean, it's just, the money's worth nothing, and our economic system's collapsed. Morally, we've collapsed. And so, everyone's got to realize there's no fixing the system. So you don't have to protest. You don't have to fight. You don't have to, rebel against it. You don't have to be an anarchist, right? But you have to protect yourself as well as possible from this insidious pollution, which means so much, like what Babaji's talking about here. And, and pray for your brothers and sisters of the future, right? I mean, that's the task at hand. And, future versions of ourselves. Go in the right direction, right? Don't go full supporting a beast that's collapsing. You don't have to, be a rebel. You don't have to go willfully against the beast, because it doesn't matter. It's coming down anyway, right? It's not going to come down because you do something. It's going to come down. It's collapsing of its own depravity. It's going to collapse from the weight of its own depravity. But you don't have to be a bandwagoner either, right? You don't have to jump on the bandwagon and, go out waving the flag of the beast, right? And, condemning anybody that doesn't want to go along with it, right? Don't be a complete sellout shill either. Just, live your life and do your best to be a good person, and realize that change is coming, and work, now spiritually to connect to God and help create and manifest a better world in the future. I mean, that to me is the most mature and balanced approach to this, right? But what Stephen A. Smith and these guys are doing is complete shilling for a system that's evil and selling themselves to the devil for something that's, it's going to disappear anyway. Your money isn't going to be worth anything in a short period of time. Like all these things are going to be worthless, and to sell out your integrity and and other people and all these things to back an evil system that's on the ropes. Like God, good luck to you, right? God help you. And so there's been an update here that Kyrie Irving, sources close to him, that apparently he told to go out there and state his position. And again, it's not coming directly from him, but this is what was said. The Athletic is reporting this.
He said multiple sources with direct knowledge of Irving's decision have told The Athletic that Kyrie Irving is not anti-vaccine and that his stance is that he's upset.
Somebody's laughed in the background. Do you hear that? Some clown laughed in the background.
Kyrie Irving is not anti-vaccine and that his stance is that he's
What kind of laugh is that? I think it's this guy, Nick Wright.
upset that people are losing their jobs due to vaccine mandates.
They're moaning and and they were saying, listen to these guys. This is on a different show on, I believe on Fox, I don't know. It's some sort of sports channel. And they have a pundit show here. And they're laughing and mocking at him for saying that he is upset that people are losing their jobs over vaccine mandates and that he's taking a stand.
It thrills Nick to no end. It is a stance that Irving has explained to close teammates, saying Kyrie wants to be a voice for the voiceless, one source said. A voice for the voiceless. Okay, so that would be noble. This guy, Nick Wright, apparently is the guy who's laughing because the host just called him out. He's the guy mocking him, right? But then it sounded like more than one person. Either way, they're all mocking him. And again, he's giving up $33 million if he's doing it because he is seeing that all these people are losing their jobs because they don't want to get vaccinated. And Kyrie Irving is showing solidarity with them. That would be a noble cause, right? Certainly more noble than Colin Kaepernick, but along the same lines, right? Standing up for people who are oppressed. And so Kyrie Irving is at the top of his game and wanted, whereas Colin Kaepernick was riding the bench and was soon going to be out of the NFL anyway. Most of these sports pundits are, for Colin Kaepernick, right? Black Lives Matter in this movement, but now, how quickly they turn on somebody. I mean, it's just bizarre. And, there's memes out there about all these liberals, white people who are saying Black Lives Matter until the black person doesn't want to vax, and they're saying, and then the white person in the meme is, saying something horrible to them, right? And so, white liberal person. And so this is where we are as a country, divided and the rest of it. But in terms of the vaccine, very few people understand what's in it and what it does, right? Very few people really have the ability for, like I said, to interpret science, and then is the science legitimate? I mean, all these ways of looking at it. But all these guys that are slamming Kyrie Irving, they're just trusting Fauci and the beast and all the people, right? They're just trusting them. That's the difference here. People who aren't getting vaccinated don't trust Fauci, don't trust the system. And, since most people don't know, the science on this thing. And again, there's the official science, but these are big companies that are making lots of money off the vaccine, the companies that are making them. There's a lot of money at play here. The big pharmaceutical companies have done a lot of horrible things, including very recently to do with opiates and the rest of it. So it's not like these pharmaceutical companies in the medical community doesn't have blood on their hands from other things, right? And have proven to be untrustworthy. And so it's just a matter of whether you trust the official story or not, or you're pressured to trust it. So you just say, all right, I guess this is what I have to do. And you take the vax. But in that, we don't know. Like, I can evaluate the pattern here, what's going on. I know the controller's agenda. So I have, more information than most in terms of, I've seen that there's a depopulation agenda here. I mean, all these things that we understand here. So we have some more information, but we still don't know for sure. We don't know what's in the vax until
we start seeing it, and maybe we'll never know, right? But in terms of these people that are condemning anti-vaxxers, you don't know, right? People who've gotten the vaccine, you've gotten it because you trust the system, you trust the powers that be because you had to, right? But you can't condemn people who don't want it, right? Just like any of these other things. We all have a choice, you know? Just because the powers that be tell you something doesn't mean it's true. I mean, they lie about everything. It's a country, United States is a country that spends more than half of our money on weapons of mass destruction and, the military. And we have a long history of war. I mean, murdering people in war. I mean, it's still murder, whether it's a war or not, and the rest of it. So, and abuse and tyranny and all these things. And human beings themselves have that. And we do have a population problem. And so with all of those factors, if somebody doesn't want to get the vax, somebody who did, can't really say anything about it. Like they don't have anything that they can say other than, well, that's what the beast is telling us. That's what the system is telling us. The rest of us are getting it. Why do you think you're better than us? I mean, that's, pretty much the only thing they can say is, why are you disobeying the powers that be? Well, because, right? Like there's a long list of reasons that somebody could come up with. And Kyrie has his now, and these guys are all just slamming him. All right, let's move on to John Gruden here. Buccaneers removed John Gruden from the Ring of Honor. So again, I just wanted to say something briefly about this. That the things that John Gruden said, and I know they're offensive to people. I know, everything that is 2021. I know why he got fired. But I also know, being around sports my whole life, that those things that he said are very commonly said, right? There's nothing that John Gruden said that should be a surprise to anybody. John Gruden's always been kind of an a-hole, kind of a aggressive guy. They call him Chucky after that little crazy doll, Chucky, in the movies, the horror movies. Whatever those movies are called, right? The Chucky character. And so it isn't like he's some great guy, right? He's somebody that, everybody knew that he was like kind of aggressive, old school kind of a coach, right? Swearing. But all these guys say stuff like that. All these, especially in the old days, people like Bobby Knight, all those coaches, all these old school football coaches. And so this isn't something new, right? This isn't something like he's the only one who did it. And they're acting surprised. Like former players, all these guys are acting surprised. Like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. They all heard it in the locker room. They all heard the same sort of things that he was saying, right? I'm not justifying what he said. I'm saying that for them to act surprised and pretend that they didn't know what kind of guy he was in Tampa Bay, like this, none of this stuff happened in Tampa Bay. They were unaware of it. The guy was a loudmouth, and he was somebody that, he said these kind of things his whole career, and they just now are being, out there as being something that you can't do anymore. But when he was doing them, they were okay. And the organizations and the players, they were all okay with it. Plus, the other thing is, how many people are in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Ring of Honor, right? I mean, they just recently won a Super Bowl last year, but I think they only won one before. And they were legendarily bad when they were, it was for years. Like, what do they got? Like 3 people in the Ring of Honor? And so I'm hearing all these players, even Aaron Rodgers, there was something on Facebook I saw he posted that are condemning what he said, right? But, these are players that for years, there's an association between rap music. And until about 2015, there was all this homophobic language in rap music. And, anybody who's experienced the sports culture knows that this isn't shocking. Like, you have all these people that are shocked at what John Gruden said, but they all have a brand. Like, they all have a external persona. They don't talk the way they normally talk. Like, remember when Donald Trump said that was locker room talk, right? These were emails that John Gruden sent personally to, friends of his and the Washington football team organization that's under investigation. John Gruden wasn't working in a football capacity. He was part of ESPN at the time. And even though the emails were very old and they were personal emails, the NFL released them. And so if we're getting into a situation where your personal exchanges are going to be released into the public, and you're going to be judged for them and possibly fired for them. And it's all the same kind of people with the same kind of attitude, the same kind of orientation to the world. People who are truthers or right-wing people that are being, condemned now. And the right-wing people had done it for years, but now have lost the power to do it, to cancel people. But someone like Jojo Magoo, who's a political shill and has voted for all these illegal wars, all the things I've covered. He just droned 7 kids in Afghanistan. He's walking free and getting no consequences. His son, let's get into his son here. Southwest Airlines rebuffed Texas governor will comply with Biden vaccine mandates. And again, this is the battle that's happening, where you're seeing, this is, it's like a civil war type of thing. And this is developing in, a very divisive situation. When Clinton and Trump ran against each other, I was like, well, whoever wins, it's going to be a divided country. It was just so much hatred for each of the candidates. And now it's even, gotten worse under Biden and all the, election stuff. And now this, thing with the vaccine, it's getting to be where civil war time, where there's going to be red states that want to leave the union. It's coming down to that with supply chain issues and all the rest of it. Very divided country, a divide and conquer, right? When any country is this divided, it's going through a divorce. You understand this. People have been through a divorce and what happens to families when they get divided. Everything stops. All the positive work stops. Everything, you can't make any sort of progress. Something Master Chargi used to say. Like there's this old school Italian practitioner of the heartfulness system. And I was talking to him. He said, Master Chargi really dislikes it when there's disharmony among people, right? Because all the work stops. Although the cleaning happens in that case, but you can't really make progress on a team, on a, as a group, if there's infighting. Like the teams that fall apart are the ones that have infighting and all the rest of it. 1 year later, the post-Hunter Biden reporting is vindicated, but still buried. And so we know that this is his laptop by now, the hard drive. They got information. Everything that came out was true. They didn't deny it. They just said, we don't know, right? It had incriminating stuff against Jojo Magoo, real incriminated stuff against this crackhead, right? And the New York Post, which isn't the best, known as the best sort of news organization, it's like a gossip rag. They nailed it, and mainstream media refused to cover it. I've talked about this over and over again. Mainstream comedians who are, like Jimmy Kimmel kissing Hunter Biden's butt when he brought out a book on his crack addiction, it's inherently funny. Like, show me how it isn't funny. Give me an example how it isn't funny that the president of the United States has a crackhead son. Crackhead is a funny, the idea of smoking crack and this whole thing, there's just something funny about it, right? Crackhead, crack, even though, people's lives are ruined, there's like lots of not funny about crack. But in terms of just the crack is funny in itself. It's a funny word. And the concept that his son, especially when he was coming down on crackheads and wanted to give them 5 years mandatory jail sentence, which I showed in another video. Somebody found all these old clips of him coming down hard on crack. And so the whole thing's funny. Jojo Magoo being like a complete bozo. He's just a clown. Like in the political world, he was a screw up. And this is his even bigger screw up kid who ends up, while being on crack, going to the champagne room, the VIP room in these exclusive strip clubs and impregnating a stripper named Dallas who's from Arkansas. And the whole, Arkansas is funny and the whole Clinton stuff. That's funny. And she has his baby at the same time as he hooks up with a young woman after he dated his dead brother's widow. There's so much comedy gold here. And it's such a huge scandal for news journalists not to cover it and for comedians not to joke about it. They have completely played themselves. Like, you can't not cover this. The fact that he was smoking crack and he dropped his laptop in the tub and he brought his laptop, his hard drive into this computer place to be fixed, to be retrieved, and he left it there and didn't remember dropping it off. Like, that's hilarious stuff, and it's a huge story. And the fact that he was being paid by foreign companies while he was smoking crack. Like, it's just, this is like the best presidential screw up son. There's always a screw up in in the president's family. Everyone has screw-ups in their life and in their family, and he's like the best one. Hunter Biden, like, a spectacular character. And the fact that they're not covering this is just so unbelievable. Dog the Bounty Hunter urges Brian Laundrie to surrender, says he looks guilty. So that means you can't catch him, right? Like, you know who else looks guilty? You know who else always looks a little bit guilty? And so you can't catch him. Like, they said there was a headline the other day that said he knew where he was. He was closing in. Now he's saying the guy should turn himself in because he can't find him, right? Like, I don't know what's going on here, but as soon as Dog the Bounty Hunter entered into it, you know, and he had all these, he had his own, like, he was racist stuff he was saying, whatever it was, right? Stuff with his daughter, I think, or was that Hulk Hogan or both of them? I don't know. Candace Cameron Burr says she has PTSD from The View. Don't we all? She has PTSD from The View. I think anybody who isn't been in war or hasn't suffered like some sort of severe traumatic event, I mean, yeah, The View sucks, but I mean, are you that weak that it caused you PTSD? But anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.